Want to know more about QuiltMotion X Foundations? Then you're in the right place. QuiltMotion X Foundations is your way to get into automated quilting using your domestic machine and the QD Breeze. So if you've ever dreamed of professional looking quilting but just aren't ready to invest in a professional setup, then QMX Foundations is for you. QMX Foundations gives you the tools and is so easy to use. All you need to do is pick your pattern, place it, and sew. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use QMX Foundations and what it can do to elevate your quilting. So be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss a great video like this one. And do me a favor, click that bell and you'll get notifications, and drop me a comment and let me know how we're doing. QMX Foundations works specifically with the QD Breeze frame, and that's because it attaches directly to the frame. And it works with any domestic machine that works with the QD Breeze frame. For the best experience, a domestic machine with a throat space of around 9 inches will give you plenty of quilting space. However, you can use a smaller throat machine. Just know that it will reduce how large your designs can be on your frame. Your domestic machine needs to be able to drop its feed dogs, or like our little Rebel, have a plate that covers the feed dogs. We're also going to talk about how to get started with QMX Foundations. I'll even show you how to sew a line, sew a block, and sew a pantograph, and how even to move to the next row. Anytime that you get started, it's a good idea to home your device, so we're going to start with that. When you first start the software, the very first time, it's going to prompt you to do that. But we're just going to go into our quilting settings, and I'm going to click Reset for rehoming the device. So I'm going to move it all the way over into the top left corner of my frame, and I'm going to click Home Device. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reset my frame space. So you'll want to do this anytime that you have changed your machine, which I actually did. I had a different machine on here earlier, so I need to let it know what my frame space is. If you've taken your machine off of your frame to use it for something else, I would also do that then as well, just because you never exactly put it in the same place every time. So that will guarantee that the system will know exactly how much space you have to quilt. Something else to note, you'll see that my frame doesn't have anything on it, including the clamps. Anytime that you home the device, you want to make sure at least your left clamp and your material is out of the way. When you are doing what I just did here with the frame space, you want your frame completely clean of everything so that you get the full amount of space and you don't get any weird jagged edges or anything like that. With our frame loaded, we're now ready to get started quilting. One of the things that's going to come up is the quilter's checklist, and that's because we have designed QMX Foundations to be easy to get started with, especially if you've never done any kind of automated quilting before. If it's been a while since you had done any quilting on your setup, or the first time you're setting it up is a stitch test. We have videos on YouTube that are going to go over how to do that, but there's also information in your tablet to go through that process with you. We've already done our stitch test, so first thing I think we're going to do is a stitch in the ditch. And one of the easiest things to make sure that you can see really well is to lower your needle as close to the quilt as possible, but it's not dragging, just so you can see that placement. And I'm going to hit the start. So now it knows where I want my line to start, and I'm going to take this down as far as I can go within my quiltable area. And so now I'm ready to go ahead and stitch in the ditch. Now I like to move my machine closer to the start point before hitting next or telling it to move to the start. That way it doesn't have to move as far. So I'm going to go ahead and click Move to Start. Once I've moved to the starting location, just like any other quilting, I want to pull up my bobbin thread. Because I moved my machine to grab a hold of my bobbin thread, I'm going to hit the Move to Start again. So I'm going to hit the next button. When you do your stitch test, you'll figure out when is the best time for you to actually hit the start or push the foot pedal down. That's why it's so important that you do that stitch test, so you get a feel for how your machine is going to work with QMX. And now you can see we're just stitching ourselves a line. It will beep at you, as you probably heard, maybe flash a little bit, letting you know that you're at the end. And so now we have our stitch in the ditch. Another way that you can use the line tool is to do an offset stitch. So we're going to do that next. I'm going to do one on a diagonal. And I'm just using the markings on my foot to determine where I want my start position to be, or I could draw myself a line so I could be sure that I'm getting the offset that I want, but this is just for practice. I found my start position, so I'm going to go ahead and hit start, and then I'm going to take this up to where I want that offset to end. That looks about right. I'm going to click the end again. So now you can see exactly how long of an area I'm going to be stitching and the angle at which I'm going to be doing this line. Again, I'm going to hit next. We're going to move to the start position, and same thing, start sew countdown. When it starts getting close, you can hear that beeping to kind of, again, remind you to get ready to stop your machine. And that's how easy it is to sew a line. Another way that I can sew a straight line is engaging the different channel lock features that we have. To get to those, once you're in a quilt selection, whether it be a block or a pantograph, or in this case a line, you'll see the 3 lines up here at the corner. I can click on that and it's going to give me a menu option. And in here we're going to select channel locks, and I'm going to tell it which one I want it to do. So I'm going to do a vertical line first, so I'm going to click on the one that says vertical line, and this is going to lock the channel lock that will prevent me from moving horizontally while I do this. Notice that I made sure I was where I wanted to be first, because once it's locked, I can't move it slightly over or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and put my foot down. And we're basically, in a sense, free motion quilting, but with a channel lock. So I'm just going to go ahead and start. And now I'm just going to bring it straight down as I'm sewing so I can get a straight line. Now, if you are using channel locks to lock in your straight line stitching, it's going to be really important how straight your quilt is on the frame, because you're not going to be able to adjust for that. As you can see on mine, my thing is not quite as straight, so I kind of veered over here. But that's, you know, when you're using channel locks, something to think about. When I am done, I just click the off button, and that is going to free up the automation for whatever I want to do next. Next, I'm going to show you how you can sew a block. Simply return to your quilting interface, and this time, instead of clicking line, we're going to click block. And now we need to pick our design, so I'm going to go to my design library. And to make things a little bit easier, I favorited the ones that I want to use on this quilt. And so this is the one I'm going to use for the block that I want to sew next. So I'm going to confirm that selection, and that's now going to populate up here. This is my chance to change my mind if I want to change to something else, but I don't, so I'm going to go ahead and click next. And now it's simply about placing the pattern. So starting with the A corner, moving over to the top right and selecting B. Down right is C. Over to the left from where I'm at will be D. And then I'm going to click next. And now I have some options to edit my design. I could turn it if I want to rotate it either direction in increments of from 1, 5, 15, or 45. So if I want it to turn, maybe I want, oh, I kind of like that. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that little angle there. I can also stretch the design. Right now it's off. And this would be what it looks like when it's stretched and on, and it's reverted itself back. So we'll turn that back off. And I'm going to go back to that little 45 that I had. And I can also flip the design if I want with these horizontal and verticals, but I'm pretty happy with how it is. And there's not a lot of differences in this design. If I was to flip it, it's going to look the same. So I'm ready to go ahead and hit next. So now I'm going to go ahead and move to start. Now, with a line, I know where I set it. With the block, it's going to depend on where the starting position of the block. So I'm going to let the machine figure it out for me. All right, so this is one where the block is starting in the center, so we have that. I'm ready to bring up my bobbin. Going to move back to start since I did move my needle position. And now we're ready to hit next. And everything's the same. We're gonna hit that start sew countdown, press our button, and let the automation run. Okay, so I made a mistake. I didn't hold the button down as well as I should have before it actually started moving, so I need to repair my pattern. And this is something that you're going to do anytime, let's say you break a needle, it happens to us, or your thread comes undone, or you run out of bobbin, right? Who doesn't run out of bobbin? So since I did that, I'm gonna click on the Show Repair Tools, and I've got to tell it where it is. So I can either do closest stitch or last stitch. Since I didn't move this at all, I'm gonna go ahead and click last stitch. If I had moved this, then I would try to move it to where I think it is on here, and then I would click closest stitch. So I've done that, and now I'm going to use these plus and minus buttons that are here to move myself back to the starting position. Well, I know that I went forward, so I actually need to go back in this case. So I'm just going to click this minus, watching it change on the screen. All right, so we're back to the location. Now I can click go to stitch, and the machine is now going to move to that. So it's kind of like moving to the start position. So now I'm going to click Start Repair Sew Countdown. This is different than hitting Next. It's just like hitting Start Sew Countdown. So be sure that you're ready to engage your machine. Here we go, we're stitching. All right, so I heard the beep, I was paying attention. Notice that I never leave my setup, right? Because it's not gonna auto stop for me, it's gonna keep going and you're gonna get a knot. So you wanna be paying attention to what's happening while QMX is stitching. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that thread. And I wasn't fast enough of getting my extra thread out of the way based on where it was. So I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit, and then you guys will be able to see what it looks like when you don't have all the little extra loose threads. All right, let me show you how to start a pantograph. Back in your quilt screen, you're going to select Simple Panto. And just like the block design, you're going to pick a panto design. So you're gonna go back to your design library. Like I said, to make things easier, I've put the ones I wanna use for this project in my favorites. So I'm gonna do this heart pantograph. Again, if I don't like it, this is a place I can change. Gonna go ahead and click Next. And now I have to decide my design height. I am doing this little bit of sashing that's right here, so I'm gonna find it very useful to actually do a little bit of measuring and also paying attention to where my start is in position vertically, so I have a better idea of where to place it on the quilt. And so I made this a while ago, so I don't remember what size I have, and it looks like I have about 2 inches here. And so I know based on where my blocks are, where my start and my stop positions would be vertically, but I want one in the middle too. So I'm just gonna give myself a little marking there, and that's gonna help me figure out where to place stuff. If this was the top of a pattern, this is the bottom of a pattern, and this is kind of the center of a pattern. So this being my top of a design, this would be a center of a design, and this would be the bottom of a design. The design height of 2.5 is going to be too large for the space that I have. So let's get this down. Now, 2 inches would require me to be really precise, or it's going to kind of overlap here. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit so that I'm giving myself a little bit of space along that. And I think I really want 1/4 inch on both sides, so that gives me 1.5. So I'm gonna go back here, and I'm going to mark the 1/4 inch that I'm gonna lose on both sides. That again is gonna help me place this pattern since I don't want it to go up to the edge here. And so this is just a smidgen above that. So I'm gonna make my best guess of where that's going to be. And now I'm gonna go to my next screen, and I'm ready to place that start point. So I'm gonna click Start there. Now it's a good idea every 10 or so inches to do the same thing. Since I have kind of an idea of where, the space is here, since, I have markings based on my quilt, I can go ahead to this location and find my center, find those 1/4 of an inch spaces that I'm going to be off a little. Helps if you can measure. All right, there we go. So as you can see, I made a couple little boo-boos here, so I'm making myself some annotations. And now I kind of have an idea of where the end's going to be, so I want to look at my screen here and find this end point, which again is just going to be above my bottom marking here, so now I can hit my end. I loaded pretty straight. All right, now I can see exactly how many inches I'm going to quilt, about where it's going to end. Now it may not end exactly where you put it. It all depends on the size of your design by the width. It has to complete the full design, so sometimes it will need to truncate that based on the design itself. It has nothing to do with your quilt space. It's not going to affect how we finish up at all. Gonna move to start. It reminds me to put my needle up. So I put my needle up, hit OK. Okay, so we're going to do that start sew countdown and let it do its job. All right, well, I learned I didn't load it as straight as I thought I had, but that's why I gave myself that little bit of extra so I didn't cross over into the blocks. Might be easier sometimes to actually stitch smaller sections, especially if your quilt is really crooked. Apparently mine's a little bit crooked than I thought that it was based on how I basted it, but I am ready to go ahead and move my quilt to the next location. So let's do that. All right, so we have moved our quilt, which means we're now ready to sew the next part of our pantograph. But I think I want to check something, because after sewing this first one, I realized that things aren't quite as straight as I thought there were. So there are some tools that may help you. And the first one is the ruler, so we're going to take a look at that. And so I can get placed where my markings are. Make my markings on the other side like I did before. And I'm just going to get where I think that is. And I'm going to hit the start point on the ruler. So it's giving me what my distance is down this way. All right, so I get to see exactly how far my distance is, but I can also see a change in my Y distance. So that's going to tell me I should expect when I place the pattern for it to be a little bit off on the screen. It shouldn't be straight across because I am off in that distance a little bit. So had I paid a little bit more close attention to that, I probably would have gotten a better result of my pantograph. All right, so the next thing that you're going to want to do is actually mark your stopping point from your pantograph. So I made myself a little X there because that's where I need to line it up for the next part, okay? I have finished, so I'm going to click next. This is going to allow me to choose to place again. My position for my start is my previous endpoint, so I'm going to click start. All right, so I could go all the way to here, but I'm still going to have a little bit of space left. So I'm going to pull this back to about here and hit the end. And so now you can see I have this angle that is occurring, which if I look at my quilt, it's definitely on that angle. So I should get a little bit better result from that. Now the other thing I could do is I could try to correct this a little bit, but I can't correct the start point. I need to more correct the end point if I want it to kind of lift. So if I wanted to do something like that, I might go more in the middle here. Again, get me some markings instead of letting it do the pantograph all the way to the end, and see if I can start getting a bit of an adjustment to get a little bit closer to being where I wanted it before. So again, just some ideas, some tips and tricks as you start trying to figure out the best way to work with this. All right, I think I'm pretty pleased with that. I'm gonna go ahead and move to start. That looks good. Go ahead and start my sew countdown. so you can see I've definitely corrected for that error that I created down here. So I'm definitely getting more of that 1/4 of an inch. So really is depending on your quilt, how you want to use this, but the process is the same for starting and continuing on that. All right, so we see our new start point, which is our previous stop point. Remember, this is where we told it we wanted to end, right? But it can't end here because the design wouldn't fit completely in there, the one unit of that design. So it truncated a little bit, but that's fine. We can continue the process. I'm going to go ahead. I'm not even going to move my quilt because I know I can go ahead and quilt from here. Okay, so I made a mistake. I didn't start fast enough. So I'm going to unpick this part here, and we're going to use the repair pattern feature so you can see that they operate very similarly as they did when we had the error in our block design. I have control of my machine, so I'm going to move it back to that start position. All right, so if I was to click last stitch this time, what's going to happen is it's going to take me to where it thinks my last stitch was that I completed, but I unpicked a bunch. So I'm only going to do closest stitch based on where I just moved my machine and needle. Right, so that's now locked it in. It knows where it's at, and I can double check. And now, as you can see, it has moved me here. I don't actually need to change anything because as you see on the screen here, that red is gone, which means it's starting the pattern fresh over, so there's no need to move with that. But if I do seem like I'm off just a little bit, I can use the nudge tools here. So this is very useful if you've taken your quilt off to maybe do some repairs, or you're tired of doing that project and you want to switch to something else. I get that all the time where I'm like, okay, I'm bored, I want to move to something else for a little bit. And so we're going to use these nudges so we can get better aligned on here. So it looks like I could stand to go over a smidgen there and a smidgen down. Okay, so now we're going to click our start sew repair countdown. There we go. And now I'm ready to continue. All right, fasten off our thread. And click next because I'm going to want to place this again to finish this up. But I can see here that I'm going to run out of my quilt space, so I definitely need to move this up a little bit on this corner, and I'll slide it down a little bit. So give me a second and we'll finish up this row. All right, so I moved my quilt up a smidge, and again I'm going to mark that location of where my stop was because this becomes my new start. I'm going to click place again, find my start location. Want to take this all the way to the end this time. So I'm going to go ahead and mark there. Now, if I look in the screen, this is where the design is going to end. So if I want to fill this all the way over, I'm actually going to need to move my stop position off where I want it to be. Okay? But it also means that I really need to pay attention because I'm going to want to stop this before it tells me to, if I want it to go all the way to the edge here, because I don't want to stitch over this part here. I can if I want, but this is not what I want to do. So we'll get back to our start position. Click move to start. Make sure we're locked in. Make sure our needle is up. Okay. And now we're ready to finish our design. Again, going to pay real close attention to what I'm doing. So as soon as I get to an edge where it looks like it's finished, it's not going to complete the design, I'm going to manually stop my machine. Going to cancel because I'm done with that design and I'm not going to continue sewing. That's what's going to release my machine. And I just need to fasten off my thread. So that's how you can get real close to your edges. I chickened out, so I stopped a little shorter. I didn't want it to go over. The concept is very similar when you want to move on to your next row down. Now, obviously my next row is sashing here, but I would basically this time measure the size of my pattern, which I know was 1.5. And since my sashing was 2, if I wanted to continue it in here, I would mark my 2s, mark my locations for those 1/4 inch that I wanted to cut off. And then I would also mark that original starting point over here so I could try to line that up unless I wanted it to look more nested. Let's talk about quilt roll up. So I'm going to move my quilt up a lot more and show you how you would use quilt roll up so you correct the machine for the space that you now have based on how big your roll is getting in the back. So I've rolled up my quilt. I'm ready now to continue doing my pantograph in the next place that I want to do that. But because I'm starting to build a roll here, I need to account for that. So in our pantograph mode that we're in here, we still have our design up. We're going to click those 3 lines and we're going to click on the frame space shrink. So we're basically kind of doing what we did before when we were doing our quiltable area, only now we need to think about like where our roll is in the way. So I really wouldn't be, I mean, I can push it back like this, but I may not necessarily be able to actually quilt a design and have it look good if I did that. So I want to make sure I'm a little bit away from that roll, but over to my left-hand side, and I'm going to click this set top left. Then I'm going to roll back down, kind of like I did before, only now I'm going to the far bottom right that I can go to, and I'm clicking on the set bottom right. All right, I can click anywhere to get that menu to go away. Now I'm ready to go back to sewing. So as I was saying, when I'm ready to do the next one, I'm going to do those markings again. And that's because I want my design to be consistent as I go through the various places. And that's because I'm doing some custom quilting. I have a little bit of different patterns on different blocks. So as I did before, paying attention to where this start place is going to be, remembering that my design height needed to change to account for the space that I wanted to take off. That's why I did the 1/4 inch increments. Going to set our start point. Okay. And the rest of the process is the same. QuiltMotion X, like I mentioned before, has all kinds of help functions for you. If you're already in your quilting screen, you can just go to the question mark that's right here. Click on that, and it's going to give you a list of the topics that are in that particular area. Since I'm working on pantos, it pulled up all those things for pantos, but you'll see things like videos, verbiage, how-tos, all of that's right here at your fingertips. Be sure to read the manual that came with your QuiltMotion X Foundations and check out all those videos that we have available for you here on our YouTube channel. That's really going to get you using QMX Foundations like a pro. And remember to like and subscribe, and I'd love to see your finished QMX Foundation projects in the comments. Bye!